Okay, so good afternoon, guys. So, welcome to the third and the final session of our series for new hackers. Good afternoon, guys. Today we have with us Mr. Naman Khurpia, a systems engineer at TCS and an ex-UITian who during his college days has won 4 hackathons and participated in a lot more. His expertise lies primarily in backend development, Android development, AI Unity, Spring Boot, Angular development, and even UI UX tonight. We are honored to have him here with us to guide young hackers on how to participate in hackathons. The stage is all yours.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Hi guys, I'm Naman Khurpia. I'll be giving you a brief session on what is backend and how you can basically build a backend in less than 1 hour. So let's get started. So what is backend? Backend is that part of the website or an app that is not exactly visible to the user. It's where your business logic is written. That's exactly to say like whenever your data comes, your backend interacts and stores it in a DB. So your backend plays the most major role because without backend, I don't think anything can work. So backend has a lot of factors which we need to make sure that they're working properly and all. So the factors can be which one is the fastest server, how is the threading in the backend, how much does the DB take time, and the server side load balancing. Okay, so regarding which is the fastest server, now this is the trickiest question ever. You cannot compare two servers directly. You cannot compare any backends directly because each of them has their own business logic and they have different interaction. Even you cannot compare frameworks. What you can compare is the threading in them. That means, does the server allow us to access two types of different data at the same time? Can two insert records be inserted in a database at the same time? Basically, how much time will the DB take to give me my data? That is the entire question. And going on to the bigger scale, we have to balance the load. Let's suppose that over 100 people are coming on a Node.js backend right now. So it's pretty obvious that Node can handle hundreds of people very easily. But let's say that it gets increased by one, or let's say it gets increased by two. Those two viewers might suffer a buffering video, or maybe their data isn't, even after having a strong data connection, it is quite possible that their platform won't show them the video in exactly the smoothest way possible. All because their data isn't reaching them perfectly. The packets in between aren't reaching them perfectly. So before I start, I would like to make sure to tell you guys that whenever I say the term backend, whenever I say the term microservice, whenever I say the term server, I mean the same thing, that is the backend. Okay, so these all are acronyms which are used to reflect the same thing. So there are a lot more factors which affect the speed of a server. I'll be going to them one by one. Like caching is there, DNS are there, CORS is cross-origin resource sharing, encryption, the information security part, basically the modules. So yeah, they play a major role in the speed of the server. I'll be going over to the next slide. How does this look to you? I guess since most of you are first years, a lot of you might have seen this in your classes for more than 100 times. This is how your teachers tell you that this is a server, the computer, and multiple clients, your phone, your tablet, your laptop, your PC, they can interact with a single server, and the server interacts with a database. This all connection is bidirectional. Everything happens in two-way. This is what your teachers tell you. So yeah, your teachers are correct. There's nothing wrong with this diagram, but to an experienced SDE, that is myself, I don't think it's exactly the same way. I don't say that. No, it's not at all. It's going to be somewhat like this. Whenever someone tells you that how it really looks. So I'll tell you, this is the This is the surface, and this is the part you can see, that is the front end. And the back end is practically much more bigger. Even this image cannot illustrate the accuracy, but I'll tell you, it is a lot more complex than you think. But over here, I'll be telling you guys on how to create the backend in the most fastest way possible. So you don't have to focus on the bigger part right now. But yeah, for the future, I would like to tell you guys that yes, it is big enough. So I'd like to show a funny slide here. This is a disclaimer. Please do not get into a battle of wits over which framework is best, because frankly, deciding the best framework is not a solution, or it's a very much debatable topic. No one knows which one is the best. No one. You can Google your own search, you can Google it basically, but I can guarantee that you won't get it. Okay, so let's get some hands-on experience on Node.js. I'll be showing you a basic code of Node.js. I have pre-written it. I'll simply tell you how to run it. I cannot go line by line. I'll be explaining you the folder structure. I'll be explaining you how the URLs are interacting. I'll tell you how you're passing the data. So yeah, Node.js is a very light app. Okay, it's single-threaded, and the code will be merely of 200 or 300 lines. It's going to be very small. The URL is right here in my repository, GitHub repository, and the instructions are given right at readme.md. So going over to the code part now. Okay, so guys, this is the code right there on GitHub. It says Node.js CRUD operations. So before I even go further, let me tell you what CRUD means. CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. That means you want to do these 4 functionalities, and these 4 functionalities are more than enough for a hackathon. So I have listed out the instructions, the setup for installation, what you need to install, line by line command. If you follow these exactly, you'll reach where I am right now. Okay, I don't think anyone should face any difficulty with it. I have already included all the files, including the Postman collection. So going over to the code. So guys, this is how your basic Node.js app looks like. We have controllers, we have models, we have routes, we have a configuration, and we have the server.js. Server.js is the heart of your program. That is, this is the point where it's gonna start running. I want you guys to focus on this particular line. It says app.listen on 3000. Over here, 3000 is the port. So you can see that server is listening on port 3000. We'll be using MongoDB because, to be honest, it's the most easiest. You don't have to write queries and stuff. It's very simple. Okay, so this particular piece of code right here, it configures your database. When I say configures your database, I mean it opens a connection, it makes sure that it's live, and if ever it fails, it should give you on the console could not connect to the database exiting right now. Otherwise, it should say successfully connected to the database. So I'll start off with the database first because that is more important. I'll close the MongoDB app. I'll open it again for you. So I want all of you to go to mongodb.com, create an account, create a random database, doesn't matter. After creating the database, you will get one single URL. That URL is supposed to keep your stuff, basically. That is where you keep your data. So I have it right here. I'll double click and open it. It's connecting right now. And my database name is my first database. It has notes. Basically, my backend is supposed to create, store notes. Note can be anything like my first note. And the content of it is upload the DSA lab by today. So basically, you can store anything. Going over to the code again. We have 5 different URLs. The first URL can be for creating a new node. You can see over here, right? The second URL is retrieving the nodes. The third URL is retrieving a single node. The fourth one is for updating any node with obviously a note ID or a primary key. In this particular case, note ID is the primary key. Deleting any node with a note ID. So I have given you 4 different URLs. You need to perform 4 different type of requests on them. A post request will create a new node. A get request on /nodes will give you the entire list, the entire array of nodes. A get on single node with a note ID attached right next to it will give you a single node. Updating a node is similar to getting a simple node. You have to send your JSON body. And deleting is again simple. You can delete a node with a note ID. So moving on to the live demonstration, I want you guys to note that we have only one data right now. It has only one node. And I will be using my Postman and terminal to first start the server. Then I'll insert some data in it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Could
running a
you
node.
please, excuse me, yeah, could you please zoom a little bit, like people are
Okay,
seeing
sure.
comments that they can't see the code. Yeah.
Sure. I thought this might be a problem, so I've already seen how to do that. Is it a little bit bigger now? Or should I make it more bigger? I can go till here.
This one's
This one's fine?
yeah.
Okay, cool. So I hope all of you can see my terminal. I have directed to the folder Notes app, which is there in my GitHub. Running it is pretty straightforward. You have to write a simple command node server.js. That means we are starting the server.js file. I'll be starting it. So it says right here, successfully connected to the database. Okay. So I'll be opening my Postman now. So guys, Postman is a tool you use to interact with your backend. Since you cannot see your backend, you can see only your database, but to interact with your backend, to send different types of requests, you use Postman. Postman is a very awesome tool. So I've already attached this list of collection in the GitHub. So you just have to import it, by clicking over to the files button and import it. Okay, so this is the home page. It's listening on localhost 3000. So yeah, it says welcome to Backend.pkg. This API creates node. No, I'll be inserting a node. This is add a node. So it's pretty much obvious that you have to send a body. You have to send a JSON. This content is a JSON body. You have to send it in raw format and select JSON. Okay, so I'll call it my second note, upload any lab by Saturday. I'll send it. And you can see my response is 200 OK. Whenever you get a 200 OK response, that means no issues have come. Your data has been uploaded. And it says my second note, upload any lab by Saturday. Created at the timestamp is stored right then and there. Getting all notes. This is another URL, localhost 3000/notes. This will get the entire list. So I hope all of you know we have 2 notes in our notes app right now. So it should give me 2 of the notes. So here it is, my second note and my first note. It reflects right here, the one which we added right now and the previous one which I had. Editing a note. For that, I'll be needing the primary key. I want you guys to focus on the first term here. This is an ID. This ID is a primary key to my Notes app and the MongoDB table. So I'll copy this particular field and I'll go to edit note with node ID. In the URL, I need to add this. I'll change this, and in the body, I'll make it to third. My third note, upload DBMS lab by Saturday. So the data should change. We should have two notes and the data should change. So it says 200, okay. Yeah, my third note. So checking it, I'll be fetching all of the notes again. And it says my third note, upload DBMS lab by Saturday. So yeah, it seems to be working fine. I hope all of you can see that it just got updated. Okay, now getting note with note ID. Now I'll be getting only one note with the same note ID, pasting the correct note ID and sending. So here it is. I pasted the note ID for the third note. So I got the data, created and updated at no parameters are supposed to change because I'm only performing a get function. But when I'm performing a put request, which is for update, the timestamp should change of the updated app. The created app will not change, but the updated app timestamp will change. And now deleting note with note ID. So here I'll be pasting the same note ID and I'll be deleting the same note. Send, and it gives me a message, node deleted successfully. So yeah, the note is finally deleted. Now if I fetch all of the notes, I should not see two notes, rather I should see only one note. So I'm fetching it again, and that's right. I have only one note now, which is my first note, which I created a few days ago. Okay. So this was the live demonstration for the Notes app. Going over to the code, I'll be stopping the server now. So these were the URLs. We performed post, get, put, and delete, all the CRUD operations. And the main logic of how these things are happening is referred right here. You see, we are calling notes.create. So I'll open the controller and you'll see export nodes.create. So this particular function from line number 4 to line number 27, this is saving a note. So first we are checking if the content should not be empty. Then if the title is empty, we are assigning it untitled note basically. And then we are performing note.save. We have a try and catch right there. This arrow is an inline function. This is the argument your function is accepting, and returning is res.send. This is what your function is basically returning. So this is for creation. This is for retrieving all of the notes from your function. This is for finding any one note in your backend. This is for updating this piece of code. And this is for deleting. So as you can see, the code looks a lot bigger than it should be, but it's merely 117 lines. And believe me, what it is doing, it is returning us a status 500 if there is an issue. Either the object ID is not found, let's say that the primary key is not found, or something is wrong, or maybe the database isn't connected anymore. So it should give you an error message 404 or 500. Some sort of error message will come. But in regular cases, you're supposed to get 200 response. So this is a basic Notes app. In the database configuration, you are supposed to enter the same URL which you entered in your MongoDB. The same URL. Make sure to enter the password correctly. I have already uploaded this URL on my GitHub, so feel free to play around with it. I don't care if you want to use my database. It's just that you cannot view it. And this was the server.js. So after this demonstration, I'll be moving on with the PPT again. Okay, So I hope all of you understood how Node.js works, how is the backend, and how easy it is. Merely 117 lines of function can store your entire list. So we have seen the demo. Now you want to make things faster. Isn't that the aim of every software engineer? You want to make things very much faster, very much quicker. Isn't that the aim of WhatsApp and Facebook? They are making sure their apps are blazing fast. So yeah, in those particular cases, let's say for chat applications, you cannot use a regular server or a backend. You have to use a new type of, let's say, a new implementation of code. You have to use WebSockets. Now, WebSockets are something that basically, let's say I want to connect to Devesh. So the first thing our codes will do, I'll send a handshake request. His code will accept a handshake request. Then his code will send me a handshake request. My code will accept a handshake request. So the client and the server both perform handshakes. That means they get to know each other. And then we have bi-directional communication online. And it's very fast, believe me. That's why Facebook and WhatsApp, they're using WebSockets in their chat applications. Basically, WebSockets is for keeping anything real time in real time. Okay, you can keep anything in real time by using async function as well. I'll be coming to that as well, but I want you guys to know that async and WebSockets are entirely different. So what is async? What is an asynchronous task, if I may? So an asynchronous task is something that updates itself. That means right now you must have seen I was sending the request again and again. I was sending the request to make sure my view page updates. An async function is supposed to update by itself. You don't have to call it again and again. It's as simple as that. You can see the event loop is a single threaded application and it goes again and again and again. It gets a call back, and that's how it is updated always. So moving on to the next stack, Spring Boot. So what is Spring Boot? Spring Boot is a Java-based framework for writing backend. Spring Boot is very heavy. It uses Tomcat for deploying. Tomcat is a server, a containerized server. So it's a heavy Java-based framework. Why did I use this word heavy? The only reason I use this word heavy is because it allows multi-threading. When I say multi-threading, that means yes, 2 or 3 or 4 requests can be accepted by the backend and can be processed by them. But whenever we need to access the database, we need to make sure our databases are transactional. That means, okay, so I'll go over with some prerequisites right now. In databases, we have deadlocks. We have some sort of locks. That means two people can never insert at the same time. It has to go first in, first out. That means it has to go in a queue. You cannot have, this thing cannot happen that one guy is updating, one guy is inserting. Yes, two read operations can happen simultaneously in a database, but two inserts is just not possible. So yeah, Spring Boot will allow that, not on the database end, but on the back end, on the receiving the requests. It will allow that you can receive multiple requests. It will allow you to manage them, but you just cannot insert two records simultaneously. That is a no-go by SQL. So why Spring Boot? Again, why do we prefer it over Node.js? Not just simply because it gives you multi-threading. There's one more way. It gives the most efficient load balancing. Okay, now I know on the end of a hackathon, you don't need to focus on load balancing because only you will be there to test it. But if ever you want to scale up and you want to make your app into a live app and deploy it for the entire world, then you will be needing load balancing. So you can check Netflix's backend. Netflix use Spring Boot as their backend service. I have attached the GitHub URL for Spring Boot CRUD operations. The instructions are attached in readme.md. You can check it out. Okay, I'll be coming on to Flask now. Flask is a Python-based framework and it's supposed to be incredibly fast. I'll be giving you a small demo on how to deploy any machine learning model or CNN model. You can choose. The URL is again there on GitHub. Okay, so Flask stands for Flux Advanced Security Kernel. Why Flask? Why Node.js? Why Node.js? Why Spring Boot? This is a big debate, and I don't want to get into it. This is because this is frankly something like choosing apples over oranges, or why choose oranges over apple. So I'll be opening my Flask code. Flask code isn't exactly complicated. It has only one file, flask.app.py, and this is my dataset.tsv. Now dataset.tsv is nothing but an Excel file. I'll open it right now. I'll explain what my machine learning model is doing, and then I'll run it so that it makes some sense to you guys. Over here, from the second column, from the second row to the ninth row, you can see there is C++ code written. So whenever a C++ code comes, we are marking it as language 1. Whenever Python code is coming, we are marking it as language 0. Whenever Java code is coming, we are marking it as language 2. So this is my data set. This is how this data set I'll be referring to train my model. Going over to the demonstration part of Flask app. So this is the code basically. And I want you guys to focus on this part here. This entire part of merely 82 lines. This is my machine learning dataset. This is I'm opening my dataset.tsv file. I'm using a for loop to extract them. I'll be giving you a live demonstration, then I'll be coming on code. So running a Flask app is again very easy. It's not a big deal. You have to write Python flask app.py. I'm using Python 3 and I've defined it as Python 3 in my terminal, so in my environment. So that's why I'm using Python 3. So you can see right here it says running on HTTPS 127.0.0:5000. Here 5000 is the port. So you can copy this URL and you can open it on a web browser. You'll see the Hello World app. So I have already attached the Postman collection for this as well. This is the GET request. You wanna perform a GET request here. And it says, hello, my fellow humans. This is what your home page should reflect. Now my Flask app has only two requests. One is get and one is post. So get request I've already seen. It's nothing but for your home page. The post request is where I'm playing the game. What I'll be asking Flask is, I'll be sending a code snippet. I'll be sending a Java code, and I wanted to see if my machine learning model can give me the correct output. So I'm sending a Java code here. It's a simple hello world program. I'm sure everyone has seen it. So I'm making a post request on 127.0.0:5000/getlang. Okay, so I got a response 200, okay. And it gives me an array which has 2 in it. I'll tell you what this 2 refers to. I'll open my dataset file. So whenever Java was coming, we were getting the output as 2. So yeah, the entire machine learning model is working over a Flask app right now. How this is working, this is the biggest question. I will not be going over to the machine learning code. I'll be going over to the Flask code. So here it is. Here we have defined the routes of our app. We have @app.route get LAN. Get LAN accepts it accepts a post request. This is where we perform our machine learning. We use sklearn and stuff and all that. So that is not exactly the main point. What I want you to focus is at this line number 59. This one line will get us the entire data we are sending in JSON format in the Flask Postman collection. You can see we are sending the parameter data. Data is having the value as this Java code. So here you can see I'm getting X, then I'm extracting text from X, and the X is basically an array and we are indexing it to get data part. I'm equalizing it to send, and then I'm just putting that value to my Porter stemmer and predicting my using classifier.predict method. I hope all of the ML and AI guys know this thing. I'm only focusing on the Flask part. The Flask part is as simple as this 3 lines. This is the main logic. And yeah, this is how you write code for Flask. This is a hello request. This is a def hello world request. This is for performing a get. You can write down a get method here as well. No issues. You can copy this, paste it here and define it as a get request. There's no issue with that. Okay, so this was the live demonstration of Flask app. I'll be stopping this server as well. And going over to the PPT again. Okay, so I've told you about how to deploy an ML model, and I hope there is no difficulty in doing that. It's very simple. It's fairly simple. You can refer the code snippets. Next, I want to make sure that you guys know about this framework. This is a relatively newer type of framework. This is called as Fast API. Fast API claims that it is faster than Node.js. It claims that it is faster than Golang. So it has compared it on its website. It has made sure that they have actually compared it as well. So for learning how to basically learn Fast API, I've attached a YouTube tutorial for you guys. And I've given my own personal code, which I use, the Fast API CRUD. That means we'll be performing create, read, update, delete on Fast API. Fast API is a Python framework, and it is supposed to be very fast and lightweight as well. The third framework which I want to focus on today is Django. Django is again a Python-based framework, but Django can be used for front-end as well and back-end as well. Now, why Django? Why not Flask? Why Fast API? All three of them are using Python. So I'll tell you when you should use which Python-based backend. This is my personal recommendation. There's no compulsion. Fast API can be used anything for a hackathon. Okay, the development is very fast. It's a merely 60 or 70 lines of code, very small code snippet, and an extremely fast, amazing performance. Flask can be used only for machine learning and AI and CNN models. You should not use Flask for the regular cases because Flask becomes a little bit more complicated on the end. Why you should use Django? This is a very nice question. Django is a little bit heavy, and Django doesn't deploy on Heroku. You cannot deploy Django on Heroku. You need a VPS solution. That is a virtual private server. You need a VPS to deploy any Django app. Now, Django is free and open source. Yes, you can use to create it backend and front end. Basically, if you want to create a big app and you don't want to keep your backend separate and front end separate, you just want to create one thing and you want it to work. In that particular case, you can learn Django. Believe me, Django itself is extremely complicated. I'll see if I can give you guys a demonstration over Django as well. This is a web page of Fast API. Over this page, it claims that it is faster than Go and Node. So which one should you choose for your hackathon? This is the main question. So guys, I will not be involving in this. It's like you're asking me to choose your desk for a party. I'm not gonna do that. Please don't let anyone else choose it for you. I would suggest you guys to choose the easiest one first, that is Node.js. Node.js is certainly the easiest one. Spring Boot is complicated, Django is complicated, Flask is simple. So yeah, this is your inference, your conclusion, all your hands. Okay, so I'll be telling over one more thing. I'm working for Western Union right now. I'm working in TCS, but I'm working for Western Union. So Western Union is a company that allows you to send money from one country to another country. It's the biggest web payment solution in the entire world, I guess. So yeah, how this payment industry handles server load is the question. Now, unfortunately, I cannot tell you everything about Western Union, but I can definitely tell you things that they are making, the things that they are incorporating so that their backend is fast, reliable, and obviously error free. Because even if I make one single mistake, it can happen that they will have to suffer a loss in millions. So believe me when I say that one mistake, it's not possible in prod. You cannot make mistakes in my company. That is certainly not possible. So what is Netflix? This is not your TV Netflix. This is Netflix OSS. That is Netflix open source softwares. Now, Netflix has spent a lot of time to develop its application. Netflix has an entire team where it develops the applications. Netflix uses Spring Boot as their backend. So they have created a set of libraries for us, and these libraries make the Spring Boot app so much faster and so much reliable that it just doesn't fail. I'll be going over to how does it do that. So yeah, this is the web page, Netflix OSS. So as you can see, it is on netflix.github.io. It's not deployed on GitHub pages if that's what you're referring to. No, this is the Netflix's open source software center. It has a lot of tools, and I have particularly used this entire package, common runtime services. We have used Eureka, we have used Zool and Ribbon. So what Eureka does is basically, let's suppose that you have an app, and that app has the capacity to hold over 1,000 participants. It can basically serve 1,000 people at the same time. But what happens when a new user joins? What happens if there are 1,001 people, or maybe let's say 1,010 people? What happens to those 10 people? Those 10 people can observe some buffering or slowness in their code. Right then, this Eureka server comes into play. Eureka will deploy a new microservice, a new same backend, but on a different port. That means if earlier the port was 3000, it will change the port to 3001. And simultaneously, it can increase the number of servers with the same code. The code is not going to change. But yeah, it can simultaneously deploy, and it can scale up and scale down automatically. You don't have to configure it anymore. You don't have to go somewhere and click that, yeah, please increase the server load. That's not the case. Eureka will take care of it. Whenever Eureka feels like the server load is increasing, it is about 80% or 90%. You can define these things obviously in the Eureka library. So you can define that if 80% of server is getting consumed, 80% of traffic, live traffic is feeding off the data. So a new server should be deployed on a different port. So some of the users can definitely access the port number 300, 3000, and some can access 3001. So this is what is Netflix. This is not your TV show Netflix. This is how Netflix manages their load. These libraries are very amazing. A lot of big companies use this. So you don't have to use this for your hackathons or anything. That's a no-go. Don't use them. You need to know it on the basis that in the future, if someone asks you, how will you balance load? So you can say that, yeah, I'll refer to Netflix OSS. That is a single line answer. So yeah, this was a business case of Western Union, how they handle their load. They use Netflix's libraries. Okay, so since I have a couple of more minutes, I guess, Devish, can I demonstrate them paper VIT backend as well, if you want?
Yeah, sure. You can go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just take a couple of more minutes. This is my Node.js CRUD operations. This is the Flask app right there on GitHub. This is a paper VIT. Now in my second and third year, I created an app called as paper VIT. It has question papers for all of the people, for all of the students. So these are the deployed endpoints for accessing Cat1 papers, for Cat2 papers, for FAT papers. Now this app is deprecated right now, but the server still runs. So you can definitely look at this code. This is what I wanted to show you. So I have visited namankhurpia.pythonenvy.com/admin. So yeah, this is the page. I'll log in with my credentials. So this is the Django administrator. I created this code on Django. The reason I chose Django is because you don't have to configure a DB. You don't have to connect to a MySQL server. You don't have to connect to a MongoDB. You don't have to use AWS. You just have to use a service, pythonanywhere.com. It uses its internal SQLite. It's blazing fast. And to be honest, it's cheap. I haven't paid anything. So yeah, going over to the Cat1 papers, we have all of the papers listed. We have certain attributes, the course code, the course name, the slot, and the year, and the data directory, obviously. Now, these files are stored as static files in the Python, in the Django-based backend. So I'll open pythonanywhere.com as well so that you guys can see what it looks like. So pythonanywhere.com, basically it can deploy any of your Python based code. It can deploy your Flask code, it can deploy your Django code, it can deploy your Fast API code. You just have to configure it. This entire code is available on my GitHub repository, paperVIT back in Django. Running it is fairly simple. Running a backend on Django is very simple. You just have to write one command. No need for any npms or pips. Everything is taken care of in the environment itself. So yeah, there are some perks to Django. Okay, moving over to the PPT again. Okay, so this was the Netflix OSS website. I guess all of you have already seen. And that's it for the day. Any questions for you guys? Any questions? Yeah, Devesh.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Utkarsh had a question. He asked,
Yes.
like, is Fast API real time?
Yes,
So,
it is. Actually, that depends, Utkarsh. I'm going to say that Fast API is usually real time, but that depends on the type of database you use and the code you write. If you have implemented an asynchronous function, yes, it will be. And most of the time, yes, I think Fast API is asynchronous. Yes, it is. To answer your question in one word.
and me and Dave also had some questions for you.
Sure, sure. Go ahead.
So, like, like, how does actually a middleware work? Like, I usually code in Node.js. and I never understood like how does a node my middleware error handler middleware is catching those errors.
Okay.
So
Okay, I
yeah,
can answer this question in terms of Spring Boot if you want, because
yeah,
that's where
sure.
I have experience in. So in Spring Boot, or I should say in Java, our middleware is right there in Tomcat server. The Tomcat server is the middleware. So Tomcat has a set of libraries. I'm hoping similarly Node.js also has. When you'll deploy your Node.js code, you'll be running it on a local server. Right now you're running it on a local server, Node.js.
Yeah,
So when you host it, it's running on your VM. And that point, whenever an exception occurs or whenever an error occurs, it retraces back, that throws clause is invoked, and it retraces back to the basically to the base most class. Okay, this is what happens in Tomcat. It has a fallback. It will go to the parent class, then to the parent most class, and then going over to the most parent class, it's usually string.class. Usually most of the errors come with string or integers. So yeah, that is where it goes.
and okay, thank you for answering that. And
Hmm.
like in terms of like speaking in terms of hackathon, so
Hmm.
like how did you like given that hackathon only lasts for around 38 hours or so.
Hmm.
So how did you manage to like make a develop an server side application in such a strenuous environment? Like
Okay, that's a very good question indeed. I'll okay. So the first thing you should do in a hackathon is spend some time on logic. You want to optimize it and you want to make sure your development is fast. So I'll tell you, backend won't take a lot of time in hackathons. Backend development won't take a lot of time. Backend is can be usually created in 1 hour or 2 hours. And even if you guys don't have that much time, you can go ahead with Firebase. Firebase is another option. It doesn't, you don't have to code anything. You can directly push your data. It's an alternative to a database. It's basically a combination of database and a backend. Firebase is an excellent solution for hackathons, but I just don't like it. It's my personal preference. For hackathons, I would suggest you guys to divide your time and divide your team members, that one guy can work on backend, one guy can work on design, and as soon as those designs are completed, the front end can be started. So yeah, for writing the front end basic code, you can start off with designing and creating the front end and back end simultaneously, because I know you have a limited number of hours, 36 hours or 48 hours. Try being more efficient in them. Try not wasting time by talking too much. So
yeah.
yeah, those are the tips I want to say.
So Dave, do you have any questions?
So yeah, like Divesh asked, I just had one question about the middlewares. How do they function? So I got that answered. And also,
Okay.
like how do you suggest we proceed? Like in a hackathon environment, like there's a lot of stress, right? You have to ideate, you have to work on it. So sometimes what happens is something's not working. So like, how do you cope up with that?
Okay. If something is not working, I would suggest you Google it. The first go-to response is to Google it and try to understand it. Okay. Whenever you get an error on your terminal, you will get some errors. Even right now, I was getting some errors. So what you can do is just copy this particular line, and make a Google search. Your Google search will tell you what is wrong with it. Okay. So Googling is definitely one of the biggest solution. Or else what you can do is be prepared before the hackathon. If you have a lot of experience in Node.js before the hackathon starts, if you can manipulate the code which I showed, Notes app, into a shopping cart application, you just have to change the models. If you can manipulate these changes, I don't think there's anything that is going to stop you in the hackathon. So I would suggest you guys to make sure that you learn it previously, not learn it at the final moment, because at the end you want some results And believe me, 1 and 2 hours are the maximum you can give. Or else you always have Firebase. There's never an option. There's always an option to use
And
Firebase.
okay. So coming back to one last question, like which I
Hmm.
personally wanted to ask you, was that like hackathons are not really about developing something. Like even if you don't know how to code, you get to learn something.
Yes.
So what was like your hackathon journey like? Like how
Okay.
did you start and
Okay. I'll tell you about it in a very nice way. I might have to show off some things. I'm going to show
okay,
off.
sure.
Okay, so I'll tell you exactly what I did. I'll tell you about the first hackathon I won. I created this application, EasyEd. So EasyEd, it was an educational tool which I created in around 36 hours again. So how do you create something so fast? This is your question, right?
Yeah.
I would suggest start off with the design part. Make sure one of your team member is continuously designing. He should design the most amazing UI. And what you can do is get the mockups ready. You can mock everything in Adobe XD to see how the flow is. So yeah, get the mockups ready, get the resources in place, and then maybe you can, okay, so when I say get the resources in places, what I mean is that open your Adobe Experience Design. Suppose I want this image. I want to use this image. So what I can do is I can export it and I can directly place it on my Android app. I don't have to worry about aligning its constraint. I can definitely save some efforts by writing in relative layout, by not making it optimal for all the screen sizes. So you can eliminate some parts of writing the code. You don't have to be exactly professional while writing your code. That is not a hackathon's aim. The hackathon's aim is to make sure that it looks in a really good way and the business logic should be perfect. That is what your aim should be. Making things faster is something, I would say, divide and conquer. Dividing and
Yeah.
conquering is the biggest thing. So yeah, in terms of web, I would suggest that you can hard code everything. You don't have to create your forms reactive. You can hard code everything in pixels and get it done with.
Okay. So thank you guys. Thank you, Bhaiya,
You're
for
most welcome. Okay, thank you for inviting me, man. That was a great experience. I love talking to
yeah.
all of you. Thank you, Devesh. Thank you, Dev. Thank you, Ritik, and the entire ADG team. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah. Now we'll be starting off with now me and Dev would explain some basics of Node.js and Flask respectively, like about the folder structure. So if any of you still have doubts, you can always reach us. Now I'll begin. So is my screen visible? Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So getting started with Node.js. Okay, so basically what the prerequisites you require is Node.js installed on your machine, the MongoDB installed, and a text editor like VS Code. And like to test those routes on your server, you need a software like Postman. So now installing the dependencies. Dependencies are like basically pre-written lines of code and which help you develop your application. In Node.js, they are installed using npm, which is a Node Package Manager. So now important dependencies which we need for our project, like a simple basic Node.js application are CORS, which is the cross origin resource sharing. So it allows you to send data through multiple platforms. So there are a lot of restrictions on the web. So these eliminate cost, eliminates those, and help us, and they, you won't get any errors. Now .env is the package we require to store environment variables in our application. Environment variables are basically those your passwords or strings, your API keys, all those sensitive data which you don't want to share with others. Now Express is the most popular Node.js framework. JSON, Web Token, and Bcrypt.js will be using that for authentication, like login and sign up, and obviously Mongoose, which Naman Bhai explained very well, which Mongoose is used to connect to MongoDB database, and the Node one is like you can have it. It is better to have it because every time you make changes to your server, you don't have to restart it. It will as you make changes, it will update. Okay, now moving. This is my folder structure. So like it is very important to have a clear structure. You although you can create your app without having this folder structure, but having a neat and clean folder structure helps you to organize and saves a lot of time finding files and everything. And it is also like clearer to the person or the anything who is evaluating you, anyone. Now these files, package.json like stores all the dependencies and the data which your Node.js project requires. It even has the data about the author. Now moving on, index.js, this is the main file through which I connect. I listen to my Node.js port, and I connect to my MongoDB URL. App.js, like I'll show you. App.js is the entry point of the app. And now API folder is the controller layer which contains the like all the routes and the handlers, everything. And handlers folder contains my business logic, like those functions, like the CRUD operations which Naman Bhaiya showed you, all of you. Now the routes is the folder which I define my routes, different routes like create, delete, everything like that. Models is the data access layer through which I define the MongoDB database models. And .env, as I explained, contains my secret information which I don't want to expose. Now, how to run and test your APIs. So, like the basically what we have to do is we have to install the dependencies and run the index.js file on localhost. In details, the code is given on the GitHub URL in the README section. You can check it out there. And to test routes, as Naman Bhaiya showed you, will be you have to use Postman. Obviously, once the routes are hosted, you can connect them to your front end application uh, using API calls and methods like Axios, AX, and Fetch. Now, that is all from my side. If you have any questions, please do tell me. So Priyanshu M. Sharma asked, like, which is better, Node.js or Django? So, like, it is subjective. It depends from person to person. As Naman Bhaiya told us, that Django is helpful in a way that it supports backend as well as front end, and it is a little heavy. While Node.js, it is easier to code and get started with. So it totally depends upon your opinion. You have to test those out and try it out yourselves. Now, Dave should continue.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Is my screen visible? Divesh, is my screen visible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Am I audible, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So getting started with Flask, which is actually completely a analog of the Node version that you saw right now. So Flask is actually a very minimal micro framework for backend. So you don't have so many dependencies and stuff to get started with Flask. It's very lightweight, and the installation and getting started is very easy. The home page of the starting page of the Flask application, if you want to get started with it, it's just 7 lines of code, nothing much. So you need to have Python installed on your system. So I would recommend installing the long-term support version of Python from Python's official website. And the only dependency for running a Flask application is Flask itself. So you just need pip install Flask, and that's how easy it is. So let's go to the Flask's primary packages. We have a couple of DB drivers. So I personally used SQL in my application that I have as a demo right now. And then there's obviously MongoDB, which is provided by Flask by Mongo. And then authentication is also handled itself by Flask in using the Flask login package. So you don't need to worry about that as well. And then we have a couple of primary dependencies that are the data dependencies. So like if you have JSON data, you need to pass that, suppose, as well as the file and OS. So for the file handling and the paths, we need file and the OS packages from Python itself. Now the folder structure is very primitive. We have an app.py here, which contains all of our code. You can split this code into different modules, but I have currently kept it in one file as it is very small. And then there is DB init, which is actually used for initializing the database. So actually, like Nirmaya said, Django has everything managed, but for Flask, you need to do everything manually. It is actually very sequential. And then we have the database here, and this proc file is for actually launching it to, deploying it to the Heroku server. And then there's a we have a templates folder which contains all of our templates. So Flask actually develops monolithic apps, so you don't have a different front end or a back end for this, but the Flask server itself serves the pages. Let's go ahead. So these are the main components, like I told, the application itself, the templates, and the static files. So you have the static files in the directory, which can contain images, your JavaScript, CSS files, etc., that you want in your website. So to start building Flask, what you need to do is just create an app. Okay, now app can have your routes, middlewares, and controllers. The controllers are basically your functions, which actually control what happens when you visit a route. So I'll just give you a quick demo of that. So I have Insomnia open here right now. Let me just create a new request. New request. And I'll copy this URL. So this is basically my Flask code. I kept it running right now. So I'll just quit this. Okay, so I guess this should be visible now. So for running the Python application, you just need to type Python app.py. I have an alias set. This should start your Flask server. So yeah, as you can see, it is running on port 5000 on my local host. All I need to do is just go to that URL, and it will actually serve me a complete page instead of any JSON data or anything. So this is actually the whole page for the app that you will be visiting on the browser itself. So that was it. So this actually uses an HTML file as its template, and the templating language used here is Jinja 2. It's a very powerful and extensible language and extensible engine. And then for static files, suppose your user has some requirements that he can upload CSV or images or some files, you can store them in your static folder. You can also keep your static files such as JavaScript files or CSS files in your static folder as well, so that they are loaded directly into your layouts. So to create a Flask app, just create an application. I'll show you the minimal code of that. It's available on the Flask website itself. You need to set up a SQL Alchemy or MongoDB so for the database connections, and then create an HTML. You can just have hello world over there, and then just run the app on localhost. So for creating the apps, the view layer contains actually the templates, which uses Jinja to dynamically render content. It is the templating language for Flask, and it uses handlebar syntax. So if you are familiar with Node's EJS or something that also uses handlebar, you'll find this very comfortable. And that's all for the Flask application. If you have any questions, you can ask me now.
So, like, if you guys have any question, you can ask us in the chat, or else we'll close the stream. I guess that's it then. Thank you, Naman Bhaiya, for joining us. It was a pleasure. Now, I think that's it for today. PPTs, everything has been uploaded.